Much. And joining us now, Portland City Councilor Angelita Murillo. Thank you for joining us, Councilor.
Thank you for having me today.
What is your expectation for what Donald Trump will be doing in Portland if your lawsuit, if the city's lawsuit against sending in federal troops is not successful?
Well, I just want to start off by saying that our lawsuit is going to be successful because he simply does not have the same facts that we are seeing on the ground. So I don't know if he's getting AI video or if his advisors are giving him misinformation, but things are very peaceful downtown. There are protests which people are allowed to engage in. People are allowed to exercise their First Amendment rights, but we are simply not seeing what he is seeing. So I am feeling very confident that we are going to win the lawsuit on Friday.
Do you see this as a move to restore order, or is this cover to send in more federal troops to do more roundups, more detentions of potential undocumented workers?
I think that this is either a distraction from the federal administration regarding the release of the Epstein files and perhaps the failure of a Republican-led Congress to actually keep the government functioning, since we are going to see a shutdown in the next few days. Or it's more sinister than that. It is an attempt to chill free speech and to make sure that people know that they are not allowed to dissent in this government the way that they were able to before. I absolutely think there is a backlash against vulnerable communities, including immigrants. I am the sole immigrant on Portland City Council, and I see that they are trying to attack our communities, but I also know that Portlanders are ready to protect our communities.
You say you're not seeing on the ground the images that Donald Trump claims to be seeing on the ground in Portland. In the past, when he has deployed federal troops, we've seen distinct images of what look like clashes between protesters and National Guardsmen, for instance, or even during the George Floyd riots. There were moments that got very out of hand, and those were blown up to make it look like they were happening everywhere, and that was the entirety of the protest. What is the message to the people of Portland about how to push back if the National Guard does show up?
I mean, I think that we have a responsibility to de-escalate as much as possible and to be responsible while also not complying in advance. So I'm not going to tell my constituents that they should not be protesting and exercising their First Amendment rights, which if the president needs a reminder, I have my pocket constitution here for him to borrow on what that is. But the military should not be coming in, even if there are protests happening. So I sort of reject that framing overall. And what we're seeing on the ground is that people are peacefully protesting. They are exercising their First Amendment rights. And it is not indicative of what we are seeing coming out of the president's office. The White House today had a press release that said that one of the historical things that they saw happening in Portland was that protesters were throwing cement milkshakes at people. I don't know if you remember that incident. I was actually there and I drank those milkshakes. There was no cement in them, but there was shavings of coconut. So I think that this administration is clearly either willfully or unintentionally spreading false information in order to expand their presidential powers and to overtake American cities and to go to war with us, which is absolutely unacceptable. We need to be a united nation, and this is a president that wants to divide us.
Angelita Murillo, thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate it, Councilor.